The night was cold, and the forest was silent except for the sound of soft footsteps. A small figure stumbled between the giant trees. It was not human. Her skin gave off a faint silver glow, almost like moonlight wrapped around her body. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling with pain. She was only a child, an alien child far from home. Her legs shook as she tried to keep running. She looked back again and again, her wide eyes searching the darkness. Behind her, something moved. Shadows twisted between the trees. The forest felt alive with danger. Her knees buckled and she fell into the wet grass. A low cry escaped her lips, but no one was there to hear it. She pressed her small hands to a wound on her side. The strange cut burned as if fire lived inside it. Tears formed in her bright eyes. She whispered something in her own language, a plea for help, but no help came. The creatures behind her drew closer. Their glowing red eyes appeared one by one in the dark. Long shapes slithered closer, their bodies scraping against the ground. They had been hunting her for hours. The child's heart raced. She tried to crawl, but her strength was almost gone. And then, light. A bright beam cut through the forest, blinding the red eyes. The shadows hissed and pulled back. The girl froze, her weak body trembling. From the light, a tall figure stepped forward. Heavy boots pressed into the wet ground. The man carried a lantern in one hand and something else in the other. A weapon, long and metallic, humming faintly. It was a human. His name was Ethan. He was an explorer, a man who traveled alone on strange planets, searching for knowledge, resources, and sometimes adventure. But he had never expected to find this, an alien child glowing with silver light lying in the dirt. For a moment, Ethan just stared. He had seen many life forms before, but this one was different. She looked fragile, too small to survive in such a dangerous place. Her eyes met his, wide with fear and pain. The shadows hissed again. Ethan raised his weapon and fired. A sharp sound cut the night, and the creatures scattered back into the trees. They were not brave enough to fight a human armed with such power. For now, the girl was safe. Ethan knelt beside her. His voice was calm, low, the kind of voice made to comfort. Easy. I'm not here to hurt you. The child didn't understand his words, but she understood his tone. Still shaking, she tried to move away, but her body betrayed her. She collapsed again. Ethan saw the wound on her side. Burn marks, cruel and deliberate. Not the work of the forest. Not the work of wild creatures. Someone had hurt her. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small medkit. He had learned to carry one on every mission. Carefully, he touched the wound. The child flinched and cried out. Ethan froze, then spoke softly again. I know it hurts, but if I don't treat this, you won't make it through the night. Slowly, he cleaned the wound and pressed a healing patch onto her skin. The patch glowed blue as nanofibers began to work. The child's breathing slowed. Her silver glow flickered like a fading star, but she was still alive. Ethan gently lifted her into his arms. She was light, far lighter than a human child of her age would be. He could feel the faint hum of her strange energy against his chest. She tried to speak again, whispering broken words in a language he didn't know. I don't understand you, Ethan said softly, but you don't have to be afraid. The forest was silent again. But in the distance, high above the trees, Ethan saw something that made his heart tighten. Bright lines of light cut across the sky, patrol ships. Their search beams swept the ground, hunting. They were not looking for him. They were looking for her. Ethan's jaw tightened. Whoever this child was, she was in trouble. Trouble big enough to bring soldiers to this planet. Trouble big enough that she had been hunted through the night like an animal. He looked down at her face. She was still awake, watching him with tired eyes. There was fear in her gaze, but also something else. Hope. Ethan whispered to himself, what have I gotten into? He adjusted his grip and began walking back toward his small outpost hidden deep in the forest. His ship was nearby, but so were the patrols. If they saw him carrying her, they would not forgive it. The child's head rested against his chest. She was too weak to move now, too weak even to whisper. But in her silence, Ethan felt a heavy weight. This was not just a rescue. This was the beginning of something bigger. Above them, the patrol ships moved closer, their searchlights cutting across the dark forest. Ethan quickened his pace, his boots pounding the earth. He had saved her from the shadows, but could he save her from the galaxy itself? The night was far from over. Ethan moved quickly through the dark forest, the alien child in his arms. Her faint glow lit his chest as if he carried a piece of starlight. Every step felt heavy. Not because of her weight, she was light as a feather, but because of the danger surrounding them. Above, the sky was alive with search beams. The patrol ships were scanning every inch of land. He kept his head low and whispered to himself, "Just a little farther, just a little farther." At last he reached the hidden entrance to his outpost, a small metal hatch buried under thick roots and dirt. He pressed his hand against the lock and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Quickly he stepped inside, carrying the child into the safety of the underground shelter. The door closed behind them, and silence wrapped the space. For a moment Ethan leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His eyes turned to the child in his arms. Her silver skin shimmered weakly, and her small hands twitched as if she was still trying to fight even in her sleep. Ethan set her gently on a medical bed. "You're safe now," he whispered, though deep down he wasn't sure if that was true. The outpost was small but well-equipped. Ethan had lived here for months, studying the strange plants and creatures of the planet. He had never needed his medical station for more than minor cuts and insect stings. But tonight it would have to save a life. He activated the scanner. A soft blue light passed over the child's body, revealing the damage. Ethan frowned. The wound on her side was bad, but what worried him more were the deep marks etched into her skin. They were not natural. They looked like symbols burned into her flesh with precision. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Someone had branded her like property. The child stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around the small room with confusion and fear. When her gaze landed on Ethan, she pushed herself up weakly, ready to escape. "Easy," Ethan said quickly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're hurt. You need to rest." She didn't understand his words, but his tone calmed her. Her glowing eyes softened, though her small body still trembled. Ethan placed a cup of water near her and gestured for her to drink. She hesitated, staring at the clear liquid. Slowly she reached out and touched it. When she brought the cup to her lips, her face lit with relief. She drank quickly, drops spilling down her chin. "Good," Ethan said quietly. "That's good." He gave her a small piece of food next, a nutrient bar. She smelled it carefully before nibbling at it. When the taste reached her tongue, she ate the rest hungrily. Ethan couldn't help but smile. "You were starving." After she finished, Ethan sat across from her. He wanted to ask questions, but language was a wall between them. So, he reached for a small datapad and drew a simple picture. A stick figure of the girl, then a group of taller figures chasing her. Her eyes widened. She grabbed the pad and quickly scratched her own drawing. Her hand shook as she drew soldiers with sharp helmets holding long weapons. Then she added a strange mark above them, the same symbol burned into her skin. Ethan's stomach tightened. Whoever those soldiers were, they had been hunting her. And from the look in her eyes, she feared them more than death itself. Before he could think further, a sharp alarm echoed in the room. The outpost sensors had detected movement outside. Ethan jumped to the control panel. On the screen, glowing red dots moved closer, patrol units scanning the forest. He cursed under his breath. They had tracked her here. The child panicked, her glow flaring brighter. Ethan turned and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Shh, quiet. They can't find you. I won't let them." She didn't know the words, but she felt the strength in his voice. Slowly she nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Ethan opened a hidden compartment in the wall and motioned for her to crawl inside. It was a small space lined with shielding that blocked scanners. She hesitated for a moment, then crawled in. He closed the panel, hiding her completely. A knock thundered on the hatch above. A cold voice echoed through a speaker. "Human, open your station for inspection." Ethan's pulse raced. He grabbed his weapon and took a deep breath. The hatch slid open and two tall alien soldiers stepped inside. Their armor gleamed, the same symbol glowing across their chests. Their eyes scanned the room like predators. "What do you want?" Ethan asked calmly. "We are searching for a fugitive," one soldier said, his voice metallic. "A dangerous one." "You will not hide her." Ethan kept his expression blank. "I've been here alone for months. There's no one else on this planet." The soldiers spread out, scanning the walls. One of them came close to the hidden compartment. Ethan's grip on his weapon tightened. If they opened it, the child was finished. The soldier paused, staring at the wall. For a moment, Ethan thought it was over. But then the alien turned away. "Nothing here," he said. They left as suddenly as they had entered. their heavy footsteps fading into the night. Ethan exhaled slowly, his body trembling with the weight of what almost happened. He hurried to the compartment and opened it. The child crawled out, her eyes wide with fear. "They're gone," Ethan said softly. "But they'll be back." She clutched his arm tightly, refusing to let go. Ethan looked at her and something inside him shifted. He had planned to explore this world alone to avoid trouble. But now, he could not abandon her. Whatever she was, whoever was hunting her, he knew one thing. He had to protect her. The underground shelter was quiet again. Ethan sat near the alien child, watching her closely. She was weak, but her breathing had steadied since he gave her water and food. Her silver glow flickered softly, lighting the small room like a fragile candle in the dark. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his tired face. His heart was still racing from the soldiers' visit. They had come so close to finding her. Too close. If they returned with more men or stronger scanners, the hidden compartment might not save her a second time. He looked at her again. She was curled on the medical bed, clutching the blanket as if afraid it would vanish. Her eyes half closed, but she refused to sleep. Every sound from the forest above made her tense. She was still a child, yet she had already learned the fear of prey. Ethan's chest tightened. Whoever had hurt her, whoever had branded her with those cruel marks, had taken away her innocence. He whispered more to himself than to her. "I need to understand who you are." Slowly he picked up his datapad again. He drew another picture, this time of himself, tall, holding a weapon, standing beside her smaller glowing figure. He pointed to the drawing, then to himself, then to her. Her tired eyes followed his hand. For a moment she didn't react. Then carefully she reached out and took the stylus. She added a line between the two figures, a simple circle at the center, as if connecting them. Ethan blinked. She understood. She wanted him to know they were linked now, together. He gave a small nod. Yes, we're in this together, but he still needed answers. He touched the burned mark on her skin gently, careful not to hurt her. Who did this? Her face changed. Fear flashed in her glowing eyes. Her hands shook as she grabbed the pad again. She drew quickly, soldiers with helmets, the strange symbol above their heads. But then she drew a dark tower, tall and sharp, with lines of energy swirling around it. At the base of the tower, she drew many small figures like herself. Ethan studied the drawing, his stomach twisting, so she hadn't been alone. There were others like her, prisoners. His voice was quiet, heavy with anger. They locked you away. She couldn't understand his words, but she saw the sadness in his eyes. She lowered the stylus and simply nodded once, her body trembling as memories returned. Ethan sat back, his mind racing. This was no ordinary situation. A child from a rare species, hunted and branded, escaping from soldiers tied to a powerful tower. And now she was in his care. If the galactic patrols discovered he was hiding her, they would call him a traitor. Humans were not meant to interfere with galactic law, but Ethan had already made his choice. He couldn't hand her over. The child suddenly coughed, a sharp sound that broke his thoughts. Her glow dimmed and she pressed her hand to her wound. The healing patch had slowed the bleeding, but she was still in danger. Ethan jumped up, opening a metal cabinet. He pulled out bottles, vials, and old tools. His medical kit wasn't made for alien biology, but he had to try. "Hold on, little one," he muttered. He cleaned the wound again, this time applying a stronger sealant. The girl flinched, tears forming in her eyes. Ethan gently held her hand. "I know it hurts. Just a little longer." She squeezed his hand with surprising strength. Her glow flared brighter, almost pulsing with her heartbeat. For a moment, Ethan felt a strange warmth rush into his arm, as if her body carried an energy beyond anything he had ever studied. The scanner beeped, showing improved vitals. Relief washed over him. She was stabilizing. "You're tougher than you look," Ethan whispered. The child gave a small sound in reply. It wasn't a word, not in his language, but it felt like agreement. Hours passed. The forest above grew quieter, the search beams fading into the distance. Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe. He poured water into a small bowl and set it beside her, then sat at the control desk. His eyes stayed on her as he typed notes into his system. Unknown alien species, childlike, bioluminescent skin, energy field detected, escaped captivity from hostile soldiers, high risk if discovered. He paused, staring at the last line. High risk if discovered. The child shifted under the blanket, whispering softly in her language. Ethan turned to her, listening. Her words were weak, almost like a prayer. He couldn't understand, but her tone was full of longing. Longing for safety, maybe for her family. Ethan's chest ached. He had lived years as a lone explorer, never tied to anyone, never responsible for more than himself. But now, in this moment, he felt the weight of protecting her. He stood and walked back to the bed. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. Her glowing eyes opened slightly. She didn't know the words, but she understood the promise in his voice. Her small hand reached out, trembling, and touched his arm again. For the first time since he found her, she let her body relax. Her breathing steadied and her eyes finally closed. She had fallen asleep. Ethan sat beside her, listening to her quiet breaths. His mind was sharp, filled with questions. Who was she really? Why did the soldiers want her so badly? And what was that strange power he felt when she squeezed his hand? But one truth was clear. The galaxy would not forgive him for this. By saving her, he had already broken the law, and yet, looking at her sleeping face, Ethan knew he would do it again without hesitation. The secret she carried was bigger than both of them. And sooner or later, the galaxy would come for them. The first light of dawn broke over the forest. Faint beams slipped through cracks in the underground shelter, painting the metal walls in pale gold. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat at the console, watching the motion sensors blink red every few minutes. The patrol ships had not left the planet. They were still searching. Behind him, the child stirred. Her glow flickered weakly in the dim light. She sat up slowly, her silver eyes heavy with exhaustion but no longer clouded with pain. She had survived the night. Ethan allowed himself a small sigh of relief, but it didn't last long. The console chimed. A sharp sound. Ethan's stomach tightened as he read the alert. Multiple life signatures approaching the shelter. Soldiers. He turned quickly to the girl. She sensed the tension in the air. Her glow flared brighter, her hands gripping the blanket. Ethan crouched beside her. "We can't stay here." "They've found us." She didn't understand the words, but she understood his tone. Her small body trembled, yet she nodded. Ethan grabbed a backpack and stuffed it with medical supplies, food bars, and a portable scanner. He slung it over his shoulder, then lifted the child into his arms. She was light, but he felt the weight of what they were about to face. The emergency hatch at the far wall slid open, revealing a dark tunnel that stretched under the forest. Ethan had built it years ago, never thinking he would need it for escape. Now it was their only chance. He stepped inside, the metal door closing silently behind him. The tunnel smelled of damp earth. Small lights glowed faintly along the path, guiding his steps. Above, faint thuds shook the ground. The soldiers were breaking into the shelter. "Too close," Ethan muttered, quickening his pace. After what felt like forever, they reached the end of the tunnel. Ethan pushed up a heavy hatch, revealing thick roots and leaves. He climbed out, pulling the girl after him. They were deep in the forest now, far from the patrols for the moment. The child looked around, her glowing eyes wide. The forest was alive with morning sounds, birds, insects, the rustle of leaves. For a second, she almost smiled. But Ethan's sharp gaze never left the sky. High above, silver patrol ships moved in slow circles. He whispered, "They won't stop until they find you." The girl touched his arm, as if asking silently, "Why?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't know. They moved quickly, keeping to the shadows of the tall trees. Ethan knew the land well. He had explored every canyon and ridge during his research trips. If they could reach the old shuttle hidden in the cliffs, they might escape. But the soldiers were fast. Within an hour, the forest echoed with the whine of engines. Drones swept low, scanning the ground with beams of red light. Ethan pressed the child against a tree trunk, holding her close as a drone passed overhead. The red light slid across the bark, stopping just inches away from them. Ethan's heart pounded. He pulled the child tighter, shielding her with his own body. The drone hovered for a long second. Then at last it moved on. The child let out a shaky breath. Ethan whispered, "We can't hide forever." They pressed on. The forest grew thicker, the ground sloping downward into a narrow ravine. Ethan slid carefully, holding the child against his chest. At the bottom, a stream glistened, rushing over smooth stones. Suddenly, the girl stiffened. Her glow brightened, her eyes fixed on the shadows ahead. Ethan froze. From the darkness, two soldiers stepped forward, weapons raised. Ethan's reflexes kicked in. He dropped behind a boulder, pulling his pistol free. The child clung to him, trembling. "Give her up, human," one soldier barked. "She is property of the council. Hand her over and we may let you live." Ethan's jaw clenched. He whispered to the child, "Stay low," then he fired. The first shot struck one soldier's weapon, sending sparks into the air. The second soldier charged, energy blade crackling. Ethan rolled aside, pulling the girl with him. The fight was brutal. Ethan ducked and fired again, his pistol humming. One soldier fell, his armor smoking. The other swung his blade, slashing across the rocks. The child cried out, her glow flaring brighter and brighter. Then something happened. The air around them pulsed with energy. A glowing shield, thin as glass but strong as steel, appeared around Ethan and the girl. The soldier's blade struck the barrier and bounced back with a crack. Ethan's eyes widened. He turned to see the child, her hands outstretched, her whole body glowing like a star. She was the source of the shield. The soldier stumbled back, stunned. Ethan took the chance. He fired again, striking the soldier down. Silence fell over the ravine. Ethan stared at the girl, still glowing, her small hands shaking. She looked frightened of her own power. He lowered his weapon and whispered, You saved us." The child looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. She didn't understand his words, but she understood his tone. Slowly, her glow dimmed and she collapsed against his chest, exhausted. Ethan held her close, his mind racing. She wasn't just a prisoner. She wasn't just a lost child. She had power. Power strong enough to stop soldiers in their tracks. And now he understood why they wanted her so badly. Above them, the patrol ships roared closer, their search beams lighting the forest. Ethan knew they had little time left. He lifted the girl and began climbing the ravine toward the cliffs. The chase had only just begun. The climb out of the ravine was long and harsh. Ethan's boots slipped on the damp rocks, his muscles burning with effort. The alien child clung to him, weak and silent, her silver glow faint now after using her strange power. Every few steps he glanced up at the sky. Patrol ships swept overhead like hawks, their beams cutting through the forest. When he reached the top, he crouched low, catching his breath. The child rested her head on his shoulder, her glowing eyes half closed. She was exhausted, but still alive. Ethan whispered, more to himself than to her, "We just need to reach the cliffs. If the shuttle still works, we'll get out of here." The forest around them grew thicker as they moved. The tall trees twisted upward like towers, their roots curling across the ground like giant snakes. Strange calls of alien creatures echoed in the distance, but Ethan's focus never left the sky. Hours passed. By the time the sun dipped low, the cliffs finally rose before them, sharp walls of stone that glowed red in the fading light. Hidden deep within those cliffs was Ethan's old shuttle, a craft he hadn't touched in years. If it still worked, it was their only chance. But they were not alone. As they neared the cliffs, Ethan noticed movement, small figures darting between the rocks. Scouts. The soldiers had predicted his path. He cursed under his breath. "They're tightening the net." The child tensed in his arms, sensing danger. Her glow flickered like a frightened flame. Ethan set her down behind a boulder. "Stay here," he said, pointing to the ground. His tone was firm, protective. She didn't understand the words, but she understood his intent. She nodded weakly. Ethan raised his weapon and moved silently through the rocks. He caught the first scout by surprise, disabling him with a quick strike. But the second saw him and shouted, his voice echoing across the cliffs. The chase erupted again. Ethan fired, his shot sparking against enemy armor. The child crouched behind the boulder, covering her ears as the sounds of battle shook the air. Then, silence. She peeked out carefully. Ethan stood among fallen scouts, breathing hard. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with determination. He hurried back to her, lifting her into his arms again. "We don't have time. More will come." They pressed deeper into the cliffs, the stone walls rising higher around them. Finally, Ethan spotted it, the old shuttle hidden under layers of vines and dust. Its hull was scratched, its engines silent, but it was still intact. He set the child down and began tearing away the vines. "Come on, old friend. Don't fail me now." The child crawled closer, touching the metal surface with her glowing hand. To Ethan's surprise, the ship's lights flickered. The power core hummed faintly, as if her touch had awakened it. Ethan froze. "You did that?" The girl tilted her head, her glowing eyes innocent. She touched the hull again, and the hum grew stronger. The ship seemed to respond to her energy. Ethan's mind raced. Not only could she create shields, but her very presence could power machines. Whoever she was, her abilities went far beyond what he had imagined. He opened the hatch and helped her inside. The interior smelled of rust and old metal, but the systems flickered to life. Ethan rushed to the cockpit, fingers flying across the controls. Engines are still functional. Navigation weak, but it might hold. The child stood beside him, her small hands gripping the chair. For the first time, she looked curious instead of afraid. Her eyes wandered over the glowing panels, the blinking lights, the strange human technology. Ethan gave her a tired smile. This ship may not look like much, but it's carried me through worse. Suddenly, alarms blared. The scanners detected incoming ships fast and close. The patrol had tracked them to the cliffs. The girl gasped, her glow flaring bright. Ethan grabbed the controls. No choice. We launch now. The engines roared, shaking the shuttle as dust and rock scattered. The child stumbled, but Ethan caught her with one arm while pulling the throttle with the other. The ship shuddered, then slowly lifted off the ground. But as they rose, the sky filled with enemy ships. Their beams locked onto the shuttle, weapons primed. Ethan's jaw tightened. He pushed the engines harder, the shuttle groaning under the strain. Hold together, old friend. Laser fire cut through the air. The child cried out, her glow blazing like a star. She raised her hands instinctively. Once again, a shield formed, a barrier of light wrapping around the shuttle. The enemy blast struck the shield, sparking harmlessly away. Ethan stared in disbelief. You're protecting the ship. The child's face twisted with effort. Her body shook, but she held on. The shield pulsed with each heartbeat. Ethan pushed the shuttle higher, breaking through the cloud cover. For a brief moment, they were free of the enemy below. But on the scanner, a massive warship appeared, its shadow stretching across the sky. The child lowered her hands, collapsing into the chair, her glow dimming almost to nothing. Ethan caught her, panic tightening his chest. Stay with me, please. Her silver eyes flickered open. She whispered a single word in broken human speech, her voice soft but clear. Safe. Ethan froze. She had learned his word. Despite everything, despite her fear and exhaustion, she was trying to tell him she trusted him. His throat tightened. I'll keep you safe, I promise. But as the warship loomed larger on the scanner, Ethan knew that promise would be tested sooner than he ever imagined. The shuttle rattled as it climbed through the thick atmosphere. Every bolt groaned, every panel shook, but Ethan refused to slow down. His hands gripped the controls, sweat running down his face. The alien child sat beside him, pale and exhausted. Her glow was faint now, barely more than a whisper of light. She had poured too much energy into the shield. Ethan glanced at her and whispered, Hold on, little one. We're almost through. But the scanner screamed in warning. The massive warship above them had locked on. Its shadow fell across the shuttle, a darkness swallowing the dawn. Then the first shot came. A beam of energy tore past the shuttle, shaking it violently. Ethan's teeth clenched as alarms filled the cockpit. Another shot followed, grazing the hull. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Come on, old friend, Ethan muttered to the shuttle. Just a little more. The child opened her eyes weakly, sensing the danger. She lifted her trembling hands, but Ethan quickly caught them. No, you'll burn yourself out. Let me handle this. Her silver eyes searched his face, full of fear and trust. She lowered her hands, resting them on his arm. The warmth of her touch spread through him like strength. Ethan pushed the engines to their limit. The shuttle roared, breaking higher and higher. Enemy fighters detached from the warship, swarming toward them like steel predators. The first fighter fired, and Ethan rolled the shuttle sharply, dodging by inches. He fired back with the shuttle's old cannons. The blast struck true, tearing one fighter apart. But there were more. Too many. The child cried out as another fighter's beam cut close. Without thinking, Ethan pulled her into his arms and shielded her with his body. Sparks burst across the cockpit. The shuttle spun downward, alarms screaming. Ethan fought the controls, his voice a low growl. Not like this. We're not done yet. He pulled hard, leveling the ship just above the clouds. Ahead, the warship's massive cannons glowed, charging for a final strike. If that beam hit, it would be over. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't outrun them. He couldn't outgun them. Unless he looked at the girl. You powered the ship before. Can you do it again? She blinked at him, confused. He placed her small hand on the control panel. You're connected to this ship somehow. You can help me. Her glow flickered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Faint sparks of light spread from her palm, weaving into the console. The shuttle's systems roared to life, stronger than they had been in years. Ethan grinned. That's it. Good girl. The engines blazed with new power. Ethan pulled the throttle and the shuttle surged forward faster than before. The fighters chased, but now he had speed on his side. Still, the warship loomed ahead, its cannon fully charged. Ethan knew there was no time to escape its range. They had only one chance, to strike first. He glanced at the girl. She was trembling, her glow fading again. Just one more push, he whispered. Together. She nodded weakly, her small hand pressing harder against the console. The shuttle's cannons charged, glowing brighter than ever before. The warship fired. A blinding beam cut through the sky, heading straight for them. Ethan shouted, "Now!" The shuttle's cannons unleashed their energy at the same moment. The beams collided midair, a storm of light exploding across the sky. The force rocked the shuttle, hurling it sideways. Ethan held the controls with all his strength, the girl gripping his arm tightly. For a second, the world was nothing but fire and light. Then, silence. When the smoke cleared, the warship's cannon was shattered, sparks pouring from its hull. The enemy fighters scattered, disoriented. Ethan seized the chance, steering the shuttle past the massive ship. "We did it," he breathed, almost not believing it. But victory came with a price. The child collapsed against him, her glow fading completely. Ethan's heart dropped. No. Stay with me." He laid her gently back in the chair, checking her breathing. She was alive, but barely. She had given everything to help him. Ethan clenched his jaw. His hands shook with rage and fear. He looked at the stars ahead, then at the warship struggling behind. They had won this battle, but the war was not over. The galaxy would not forgive him. They would send more ships, stronger ones. He turned back to the girl, brushing a strand of glowing hair from her face. She looked peaceful even in her exhaustion. "You saved both of us," he whispered, "and I'll protect you, no matter what it costs." The shuttle's engines hummed with her lingering energy, carrying them away from the planet and deeper into the stars. Ethan set a new course, anywhere far from the patrols, anywhere the galaxy's laws couldn't reach. But even as he plotted their escape, the scanner flashed with a new warning. Another signal, another ship. This one was even larger than the warship they had just fought. Ethan's eyes narrowed. So it begins. He reached for the throttle, his voice calm but steady. "Rest now, little one. I'll keep us flying. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The child stirred faintly, her silver eyes opening for just a moment. She whispered one word, broken but clear, "Together." And with that, the shuttle sped into the unknown, with an entire galaxy hunting them. The shuttle glided through the silent sea of stars. Behind them, the ruined warship shrank into the distance. For a brief moment, the galaxy seemed calm, but Ethan knew better. He sat at the controls, eyes locked on the scanner. The signal of another ship still glowed red. It was larger than anything he had faced before, and it was moving fast. He had escaped one battle, but this was far from over. Beside him, the alien child lay in the co-pilot's chair. Her glow had dimmed to almost nothing. She looked like a candle about to go out. Yet her breathing was steady, and her small hand rested lightly on the console as if even in her sleep she was connected to the ship. Ethan glanced at her. For a long moment, his hardened face softened. In all his years of wandering, he had never felt responsible for anyone but himself. Now he carried the weight of a life the galaxy wanted erased. He whispered, "You shouldn't even be here." And yet, here you are. The scanner beeped again. The massive ship ahead was no longer still. It was turning, facing them. Ethan's jaw tightened. He could run, but he couldn't outrun something that size. Not for long. The child stirred. Her eyes flickered open, glowing faintly. She looked at Ethan, then at the scanner. Even without understanding his language, she knew. Danger was coming again. Ethan leaned closer. "We can't fight them, not like before. But maybe we don't have to." He tapped the console, pulling up a star map. Dozens of systems lit the screen, but one stood out. A dead world marked in red. A planet abandoned long ago, cut off from trade routes. Few ships dared to pass near it. Ethan pointed to it. "If we can make it there, we might lose them." The girl's silver eyes studied the map. Then slowly she nodded. The shuttle turned sharply, engines burning as Ethan set course for the dead world. Behind them, the giant ship followed, its shadow crawling closer and closer. Hours passed like years. The girl fell back into sleep, her body too weak to stay awake. Ethan never took his eyes off the scanner. Every time he thought they had gained distance, the red signal pulsed closer again. Finally, the dead planet came into view. It was a cracked, barren world, scarred with deep canyons and broken mountains. No lights, no life, just silence. Ethan guided the shuttle into the atmosphere. Turbulence shook the ship, wind screaming against the hull. He tightened his grip on the controls, fighting to keep them steady. They broke through the clouds and the surface stretched before them, a wasteland of dust and ruins. Ethan spotted jagged cliffs and dove toward them, hoping to lose the enemy in the terrain. The scanner beeped again. The massive ship had entered orbit. It wouldn't be long before fighters rained down. The child woke, her glow faint but steady. She sat up, gripping Ethan's arm. Her lips moved, forming a soft word in her own language. He didn't understand it, but her eyes told him enough. She was asking, "What will happen to us?" Ethan met her gaze. "I don't know, but I won't let them take you." The shuttle slipped into a canyon, flying low between walls of stone. The engines groaned from the strain, but Ethan pushed them harder. Dust and rocks trailed in their wake. Suddenly, the scanner flashed red. Fighters. 3 of them had already entered the canyon behind them. Ethan cursed under his breath. He banked the shuttle sharply, weaving between cliffs as enemy fire rained down. Bolts of energy exploded against the rocks, shaking the ground. The child cried out, clutching the console. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Hold on!" He dove under a stone arch as beams scorched past. The shuttle scraped against rock, sparks bursting from the hull. 1 fighter slammed into the canyon wall, exploding in a ball of fire. 2 remained. The girl closed her eyes, whispering softly in her own tongue. Her glow flickered brighter. The shuttle's systems responded, lights glowing stronger, engines roaring with new life. Ethan felt it, her power flowing into the ship again. The controls felt lighter, sharper. He grinned despite the danger. "That's it. We're not done yet." He pulled the shuttle upward, flipping into a steep climb. The remaining fighters followed, but Ethan twisted sharply at the last second. The shuttle darted into a narrow gap between cliffs. The fighters tried to follow, but one clipped the rock and burst apart. Only 1 remained. The last fighter closed in, its weapons locking onto the shuttle. The girl opened her eyes, glow burning bright. Her hands pressed against the console. A shield formed again, but this time it wasn't just around the shuttle. The canyon itself shimmered with light, as if her energy had touched the stone. The fighter fired, and the blast rebounded, slamming back into its own hull. The explosion shook the canyon. Silence fell. Ethan stared at the girl in awe. Her glow dimmed again, and she collapsed into the chair, completely drained. Ethan caught her, his chest heavy. "You're full of surprises," he whispered. The shuttle drifted deeper into the canyon. Ethan slowed the engines and finally landed in a hidden cave. The ship powered down, silent in the darkness. For the first time in hours, there was peace. Ethan carried the girl to the back of the shuttle and laid her on a blanket. She was asleep before he even set her down, her small chest rising and falling steadily. He sat beside her, staring at the cave walls. His thoughts churned. The council, the soldiers, the giant ship above, it would never end. They would chase her across the stars until either they caught her, or until he found out the truth of why she was so important. The child stirred, whispering softly. Her lips formed a word in broken human speech. "Name." Ethan blinked. "You want my name?" She nodded weakly. He smiled faintly. "Ethan," she whispered again, her voice so soft it was almost lost to the cave's silence. "Leora." Ethan froze, her name. She had told him her name. He looked at her sleeping face, his voice a whisper. "Leora." Before he could say more, the scanner beeped faintly. A warning. The massive ship was still in orbit. They hadn't escaped. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he looked up at the cave ceiling. His voice was calm, steady, filled with resolve. "They'll come, but they don't know me. And they don't know you. Together, we'll make them regret it." Outside, the dead planet slept in silence. But above, the shadow of the galaxy's law waited, patient and merciless. The real war had only just begun.